everybody? It's the Bulls Show, aka Aidan, and welcome back to another video. Today, I kind of want to talk about a role player that probably hasn't got much mention in relation to his own video, ladies and gentlemen, and he's someone that's performed very well for the Chicago Bulls over recent games. It has been inconsistent at times, but for the most part, this guy is someone that I like to call the perfect role player, someone that knows what he does, knows what he's good at, and gets the job done in Derrick Jones Jr. But before we get started, please like and subscribe to the Bulls Show, turn notifications on, and let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls and Derrick Jones Jr. Now, he's actually put in a very typical or a very unique situation, I should say, not typical at all, because this guy is playing a position right now that I find very hard to believe, but he is doing fairly well at it. Before we go into that, let's look at the season averages that he's currently having with 13 games played for the Chicago Bulls. His averages are 7.4 points per game, 3.8 rebounds per game, 0.5 assists per game, shooting 61% from the field and only 28.6% from the three-point line. He's not taking too many threes, so that stat is not really important to me. 61% from the field is very big for the Chicago Bulls, considering he's averaging more points and taking more shots. He's making more shots as well. So he's having a pretty good year so far in relation to his statistics, and he has been very good for the Chicago Bulls, and in my opinion, very pivotal towards how we're playing and how we're winning these games. And let me give you a reason why. Obviously, we all know what Derrick Jones Jr. is good at. He's good at a number of things: athleticism, offensive rebounds, hustle plays, good quality defender in terms of perimeter and sometimes in the paint as well. And he's someone that knows his role very well and gets the job done when he plays. There's a reason he's playing a lot of minutes coming off of the bench, and there's a reason why the coaching staff is deciding to play him at the center position. Now, center position is a really tough one for Derrick Jones Jr. because at the end of the day, he's not your typical center, and he's not someone that I can ever see being a permanent center in this league. However, in an emergency circumstance, we are trying to play a 9 to 10 man rotation, and we are trying to get a little bit of small ball going. We are relying on Derrick Jones Jr. at the center position. We all thought coming into this league, coming into this team, Derrick Jones Jr. would be a small forward or a power forward for this team. And at the beginning, he was a power forward. He was playing at the 4. He was doing his thing at the 4. But at the center position, he is showing that he's truly capable of being a small ball center for the Chicago Bulls. And it shows in his stats. In his last game, he had 8 points, 3 rebounds. In the game before that, he had 16 points and 8 rebounds. So he's having good nights in terms of the bench production and good nights in terms of the small ball center. Now, what are the positives and what are the negatives of Derrick Jones Jr. throughout this season? As I mentioned before, one of the negatives for Derrick Jones Jr. is his inconsistent performances. And let me give you an example here. I think the best example for Derrick Jones Jr. is the two Staples Center games against the Clippers and against the Lakers. Against the Clippers, he struggled. He had, I think, 2 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block. He was my must improve for that game. He did not have a great time. The Clippers had much bigger men than him, so he ended up getting bullied at the center position. He ended up having a really lackluster game, got into foul trouble, and the game didn't come to him as naturally as you would like. He goes to the Lakers game. I don't remember the exact stats of his Lakers game, but it was a much better performance in terms of the Lakers game for Derrick Jones Jr. And again, it just shows that even within two games different, every game is played differently, and he ended up getting a really strong game against the Lakers. He didn't have a great game against Portland. He had an elite game against the Denver Nuggets. One of the players that should be considered for player of the game in that game ended up having a really nice performance over there in Denver. So that's probably the weakness. It hasn't been consistent, but he's the perfect role player in my opinion, because the biggest positive, as I've said 2 times already in this video, and I'm going to say it again, Derrick Jones Jr. knows what he's good at. He's good at cutting to the basket. He's good at finding pockets of space around the paint to try and get a shot off. He's someone that is going to be competing for rebounds constantly because he has the athleticism to do so. I don't know how this guy doesn't get tired, because the way that he plays, him and Javonte Green in the most physically demanding positions for their size at the power forward and center position. And these guys are athletes. These guys are playing phenomenal in terms of their fitness and their energy. I just don't know how they get tired. How do they not get tired? Derrick Jones Jr. in the first couple of minutes is sweating like a madman because he's playing so hard as soon as he comes on. How is he not tired, ladies and gentlemen? That's one of the things that I'm really the most impressed about with him, is that he's doing these things as a center, as a power forward. He's getting rebounds. He's going to the paint. He's dunking. He's dunking from behind the free throw line at times. And he's just doing a great job as a really small ball center. Someone that I can truly trust and rely on off of the bench, not as a starter. Off of the bench as a center, especially when other teams are going small ball as well. He's someone I can really trust in that position. But it's a bit surprising to me how he doesn't get tired. And I guess these are NBA athletes at the top physical condition you could possibly get to, and I guess that's the reason why. But still, I've seen players get tired at the center position. I've seen players on our team get tired when they play the center position. So it's good to see that he doesn't, or at least he doesn't show that he is. And I'm really impressed with his performance at the center position. Now, does that mean he should remain the center of the Chicago Bulls for a permanent thing in terms of coming off of the bench? I don't see him starting at the center position because I think Tony Bradley is there to just provide size, and also it's to see whether or not teams are going to bring different lineups at you. The reason why Tony Bradley plays at the beginning of the games, in my opinion, is because we don't know exactly what teams are going to throw at us. And we make adjustments based on that. We make adjustments based on what teams throw at us, if they're going big or small. That's why you kind of saw Alize Johnson play a little bit as well, because they went a little bit bigger. So Alize got some minutes against the Knicks. And it's just to determine whether or not that's going to be the case. So I don't see Derrick Jones Jr. starting, because that could be an indication of them reacting to us instead of us reacting to them. But he's definitely someone off of the bench I could rely on at the center position, but this should not be a permanent position for Derrick Jones Jr. And I strongly believe it won't be a guaranteed or a permanent position for Derrick Jones Jr. Because I truly 100% believe when Vucevic returns, obviously Vucevic is going to be the starting center. He's proven himself as an all-star caliber center throughout the course of the years, and he's definitely someone that I can't wait to see return for the Chicago Bulls, and he's someone that's going to be making this team's life a lot easier in terms of the offensive end. We don't have to rely so much on Levine and DeRozan and Lonzo as well. You get to see Vucevic kind of pull the weight off of those players a little bit. So he's definitely going to be starting. But off of the bench, I think Tony Bradley is he's the perfect bench player. And Derrick Jones Jr. is a perfect power forward, in my opinion, for small ball type lineups. He's the perfect power forward to play because he's unique, that he's only 6'5", just like Javonte Green. They both have this. They're unique in that they're only 6'5", but their athleticism, their aggression when cutting to the paint, and just knowing where to be on the court, especially as a power forward and a center, allows them to play those positions and do it very well. But it shouldn't be permanent, because at the end of the day, we do lack size. Size is a big issue, and I don't see Derrick Jones Jr. as a center fixing any size issues whatsoever. So when Nikola Vucevic returns, I expect Tony Bradley to move as the permanent bench center. And I think he's the perfect bench center because when he plays against bench centers, he seems to do fairly well. But once he's in the starting lineup, to be fair, the last two games have been very good for Tony Bradley, but he has struggled in the starting lineup for this team. But he's someone that's really showed what he could bring coming off of the bench. And I see Derrick Jones Jr. moving back to the number 4 position, the power forward position for the Chicago Bulls. And I see him doing exactly the same thing. I see him doing pick and rolls. I see him cutting to the basket. I see him attacking the glass. And I see him being the athlete that he is, and I see him doing it at a very high level. So this is my video talking about Derrick Jones Jr. I've also talked about Javonte Green in many ways as well in this video, but I'm not going to mention him in the title or anything. This is a Derrick Jones Jr. video because in my opinion, this man has been very impressive. He's loved the Chicago Bulls. He called himself a super fan of the Chicago Bulls, and ladies and gentlemen, all I can say is that I'm extremely happy he's playing for the Chicago Bulls, and maybe this is a situation where we could bring him back in free agency if he can continue this level of performance, because he's shown he's a needed player off of the bench, and he could definitely be someone we bring back. it's clear to see why the Bulls wanted him from 2 years ago to last year, and we obviously got him this year, and this is the reason why, and he's doing a very good job. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Just a quick video about a player that I don't think gets enough recognition on this team, definitely from me as well, and he's someone that I wanted to talk about today. And we'll continue to discuss other players around this team, especially when they're performing well, and we'll also discuss more about games which we'll see against the Indiana Pacers in a couple of hours, a back-to-back, and hopefully Derrick Jones Jr. can perform once again against the Pacers. Take care and peace.